was kind of cool last night.
Yeah, it was kind of cool last night.
Chilly.
So there's quite a bit of weather change. There's a lot of storms moving through the United States right now.
Mm.
And New Jersey's having fires. This is so much going on.
Yeah, there's big fires in New Jersey.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow.
Okay, so yeah, so here there was actually fires in Jerusalem.
Oh wow!
In Israel, yeah, they said it had a lot to do with the dry. Sometimes it's easy to forget, like how you're in a desert. You know what I mean? Like there's so much development, but you're in the Middle East. You know, there's like there was like
What?
It was like freezing with you.
it was like a camel. Like I mean, you got like in certain places, like I have friends like there was a camel like walking down the street. You know?
Wow.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, it's kind of weird too because like in like for example in the New Jersey area, they just had like massive winters, right? I mean like snow, feet of snow, and it's you know, and for a long period of time, then they had a lot of rain, but then all of a sudden you get forest fires, you get fires.
Yeah.
Like as if it was dry. It's almost like you get totally saturated and then totally consumed with fire. It's weird.
So one of the ideas before we go into this tshuva, first of all, this tshuva, I thought, I mean, this Shari tshuva, when I saw it, it's like, you know, it's basically like 4 sections, you know? So I was thinking like, okay, we'll get through it and move on. It's like, this is like work, man. This thing, the first section is like 50 parts, you know? And we're only at 19. I don't know how we'll get through all of it, but this week we're doing it. Every week we're gonna have a different like mode of learning, right? Because I mean, it's just every week's different, right? And a lot of times, you know, you see us jumping from different safers, different rabbis, but what's important about it is the idea of opening, like basically cracking open a safer and just making that connection. And sometimes you circle back to it, right? I don't know why my thing's in Hebrew subtitles. I thought it was supposed to be English. Anyway, I try to fix it. But anyways, the point is just saying that. So that's what we're doing. So we're covering a lot of ground because we are connecting to, at this stage, the amazingness of literature. But I do want to just briefly talk about a very powerful set of conversations that were happening today between myself, the Rabbinut, and the people in Egypt. I mean, in Nigeria. Hold on one second. I apologize. So things like this. The issue, and I spoke about it before, but the issue that we're moving past with the whole Nigeria thing is looking at that situation. Every situation is unique, right? I mean, in America, it's a unique situation. There's people in different parts of America, different ideologies. Oh, this subtitle is kind of annoying me a little bit. Anyways, there's different, you know, ideologies around America, and especially with the continent of Africa. You know, now the thing is that you know, when you think about the idea of the concept of Africa and its relation to Judaism, one of the biggest issues in Africa in general, in certain places at least, is resources, right? And so, you know, me going over there and wanting to, you know, create a rabbinical program, or not create. I mean, Chief Rabbi Pinchas already has a rabbinical program, what we're going to have to do is just figure out how to. It's a lot. It's a lot to it. I'll address that in a second. But the point is just saying. So the thing is you have to create economies, right? And everything that we're doing, we're operating independently. We're doing things. I mean, there's a lot of support. Everyone knows what we're doing. And everyone's, but it's not. This is all new ground. The Jewish world specifically has been like very much in a place of survival for hundreds and hundreds of years. Even though there have been Jews that have had success in the secular world and made some money, and everyone takes notice when the Jew makes money, but in reality, the Jewish people have been like very much undercover, very much insulated. So now there's like so many new groups emerging, right? We see people throughout India, we see people throughout Africa, we see people in the Middle East, that have these traditions, because now we have social media and social technology. They have these traditions where they trace themselves and say, hey, we're part of these tribes, we're here, whatever, blah, blah, blah. They may not understand Judaism the way that we understand it in the West. They have less of a Talmudic influence, which is pervasive in many Jewish communities. Over the centuries, right? Over the millennium. Recently, over the last few hundred years, many people got access to Talmudic learning. You see more of a normalization of halakha, which is Shulchan Aruch, and these types of mechanisms. But before that, it was like communities, and they understood the Torah the way that they did. So now comes along us, and we're like, hey, the people feel comfortable. You have Chief Rabbi Pinchas, for example, who basically had the vision to establish a rabbinical program in Africa in general, throughout the continent, so the people in Africa, in essence, could be independent, right? So anyway, so with that being said, the conversation that was today was a combination of just basically talking to the Nigerian youth, which is really like the strongest organization in the Jewish community for the Nigerians, is the Nigerian Youth Movement, and getting them on board with this rabbinical thing, because there are things like, hey, how do we recognize as Jews? Because they know that they have this thing, they've been doing this, but they want to be connected to their brothers and sisters. They want to have the same access that I have, right? They want to be able to come to Israel, they want to study in yeshiva, all these things. So I told them, and this is like, Rabbi Pinchas has very much been in this place of vision. So I told him, I said, there's two ways to do it, right? One way to do it is from the frame of there's an individual, and this individual, says, hey, I want to be Jewish, or I feel that I'm Jewish, and he goes to some rabbi, and he goes to this conversion process, he learns the halakha, the laws, this, the whole thing, and then, boom, circumcision, whatever the thing is, he needs to happen, he goes in the mikveh, he comes out, presto, he's Jewish. Great. He gets a certificate from the rabbi saying he went through the conversion process. This particular rabbi is known by this particular group of rabbis, whatever, and then so this person's converted. That's one level. But I told him the level that we're at right now, right, and the level that we are pursuing is a level where they become rabbis themselves. And they are performing, they're already doing this in many ways, okay? But they are performing, the circumcisions, what they're already doing. They are performing they're doing Shabbat. They have their own rabbinical court. So when there's issues in the community, they're able to have a court that can address these issues and seek the help of other courts in finding solutions, right? And so that dynamic is there. And I said, as a community, as you establish yourself as a community, then over time you start engaging with other communities and other rabbinical people and inviting them over to come and see, and you build a story, right? And so that's the vision of going forward with the project in Nigeria. With that being said, the issue is like this, or the opportunity is like this. the opportunity is to establish a court system in various parts of the west of Nigeria. And the Igbo people had to correct me too. I mean, the people in Nigeria had to correct me. They said, you're always saying Igbo this, Igbo that, but there's more tribes here that are not Igbo that are also Israelites that have been practicing just as long as well. I said, you're right. So that's been a mistake on my side. So we want to change the language to the Israelites on the west of Africa, right? Those tribes, we want to do that, and we want to figure out a thing. So the thing is, so I said to him like this whole conversation started because I said I want to establish a Igbo Israelite. I say Igbo, but now we're going to change it to Nigerian. A Nigerian Israelite, African American Israelite economy, right? And what that means is that there's millions of African Americans that, because of the racism in America and the suppression of our history and the details of our history and how consortative an effort that was in North America, that there's a huge void there in the African American thought process. And now that we have the internet and we have the DNA and all these different things, now we could clearly see that many African Americans come from the west of Africa through the transatlantic slave trade. And the people who were sold in the transatlantic slave trade were people who were kind of like in an indentured state in those communities. And those were the Israelites, right? They weren't the ones with the power. They weren't the ones, negotiating with the Arab Muslims in the slave trade or anything like that. No, these were the indentured people. And there were some, people, from those tribes also helped facilitate, things. So there's some dark history there, right? But the point is saying that what we're introducing now, and I'm asking Hashem to give names for these things, right? Because right now this is all happening in real time. But the thing is to be able to create a unified identity between the Israelites of the west of Africa and the African American community. And that identity is a shared experience through the transatlantic slave trade. It's a shared experience through understandings about God. And it's a shared understanding of our connection to the land of Israel, right? And so, so the future going forward in this imagination that, you have to create the imagination first. You have to show people things that they didn't think about, right? And so, and I want to get your reflections on this point before we move forward into the shir. But the point is saying that the future is having spiritual transformation centers inside of Nigeria, where African Americans can come to school there and learn and go through a spiritual conversion back to their origin, right? Because a lot of times African Americans, and again, you have to give Chief Robert Pinchas credit on this, because he's the one who created this discussion that we're talking about, right? And you see a lot of times, and Robert Pinchas, he wrote about this actually, about the Ethiopian Jews. And he talks about the aspect that the Ethiopian Jews had a 2,000-year-long history. And that 2,000-year-long history, that they have was something that allowed them to stay Jewish all this time, to the point where other people came and said, hey, you guys want to come to Israel? And we know the whole situation, Operation Moses, whatever. They came and they brought Ethiopians over to Israel, the whole thing, right? So we know the story. So the thing is, but they kept a tradition. But when they came to Israel, they wanted to adapt to this kind of like new form of Judaism, right? Meaning that they had traditions, but now they're a part of this much broader society. And so now they have to deal with that, right? And so the solution in dealing with that was, okay, we'll bring them into the Sephardic community and bring them into the Ashkenaz community. And within those communities, there's variations, you're the Mizrahi, all these people. So you'll meet Ethiopians. Like I lived in Meir Sharim, which is one of the most religious places in Jerusalem. And I was there for 4.5 years. And there's Ethiopians that lived in that community, and I would see them and they would see me and we would wave, but I never really chilled with them because my Hebrew wasn't so good at that time to chill. And they didn't speak any English, right? And so you'll see Ethiopians in very, very religious, Hasidish, Ashkenaz communities. You'll see them in other communities, but the vast majority of Ethiopians are not religious, right? And many of them are very secular and very much in the identification of being Israeli. And so Chief Rabbi Pinchas brings that out, and he says that the reason why that exists is because they took away the people's culture, right? They took away their culture and the Masorah, their traditions that they had for all these years with the leaders. I think they're called like Kishim, or the Kishim. They had names for them. I mean, I'm not like an expert on everything to do with it, but the point is just saying that was something that when they came to Israel, they got away from their traditions. And once you remove the traditions from the people, then they fall into whatever customs are there. But you can't really. It's very difficult to pass that on, right? It's very difficult. It's like sometimes you see these people, these girls will marry a non-Jewish guy and say, "Oh, well, the kids are still Jewish." Yeah, but your grandkids won't. Right? Because that transfer of culture, that lador vador, that from one generation to another, that has to come from a place of authenticity, right? So many African American Jews that you see that are Orthodox, they're almost anti-Black, right? They're almost anti-Black, and because they have such of a lack of identity of who they are, they had to get rid of their identity to become a part of the Jewish community. Right? So you see them dressing like they're European. You see them with the big strimals, the whole thing, the big Becca shirt. They ain't never been in Europe one day in their life, right? But that's how the culture and the community that they're a part of is there, right? Now the thing is, even though those parents and those people are very inspired and they're into Judaism and they want to dress a certain way and they want to talk a certain way and being that, the kids that they raise don't end up being religious like them, right? Most of their kids go away from the Torah in certain ways, right? And if they do, they find lower degrees of observance. Like they feel more accepted or connected in Reform, Conservadox, these types of things. And you see it, right? And you say like, well, why is that the case? Because the kids saw their parents not standing 10 toes down, for lack of a better term, on who they were. Because as African Americans, it's like we've never been able to talk to God in our voice. As much as they want to romanticize Christianity and the Christian church, our ancestors, they beat that into our ancestors, right? We were never Christian in the west of Africa. We never believed in Jesus, ever, okay? The Igbos didn't become Christian until the 19th century, and they forced them. They forced them into that. They created laws. They made it forbidden. You should hear the stories from the Igbos about what it was. And only some of them were strong enough to resist that. And many of them were persecuted. Hundreds of thousands, millions of people murdered, right? Because they resisted this Christianity, right? That's where we came from on slave ships. We were never on that, right? And so when the whole concept of the Black church is the basis of we weren't good enough to pray in the white church with the Protestants. So they gave us the Baptist church, right? And we're okay with that. Same God, but we got our own thing. We sing our own way, when they come to our church, they feel good, blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, the language, the concept is foreign to our ancestors, right? And so therefore the participation in Christianity has nothing to do with the authenticity of our heritage and our culture. It's an assimilation mechanism created in America. So how can you build a powerful community, right? And again, we have to, it's like, as African Americans, we took chitlins and made them good, right? We took the intestines of the pig and we found a way to make it good and crunchy and spicy. And so we accepted chitlins, right? Because we made it better. But it's the same thing, right? By the church, right? We got that. They gave us chitlins, but we made it better. We all this God. We in fact, Black people saved Christianity in the West. It was a Black church that created a revitalization with the white people in their church because they didn't have the spirit, the soul, these types of things. It's a whole story. But the point is, you guys probably know it better than me. The point is saying it's never been a part of our culture, ever, right? That's not to say Christianity was not in Africa, in Ethiopia. I'm not saying that. I'm talking about these tribes, okay? I'm not talking about the continent. I'm not talking about other, I'm talking about these tribes, right? And so we have, in that whole experience of Christianity, we never spoke in our voice. It was never our voice, right? And we talked about yesterday, Islam. That's not, what's that got to do with us? We're not Ishmaelites, you know? And then there's all these other, so the point is saying, why haven't we been able to build a successful communities in America? Oh, because the white man, every time we did it, you know, Black Wall Street, you know, this. Okay, that's economics. That's economics. Economics come and go, right? Economics come and go, depending on the marketplace, depending on your position. We're talking about why were we at a level where we taught the whole world about a peaceful demonstrations and resisting evil through compassion and love, and brought the whole world to his feet and changed, you know, the evil in America to a degree. And in this generation, we got Sexy Red, right? How do we go from Angela Davis to Sexy Red? How do you do that? And I'm not an Angela Davis fan. I'm just asking about how do we do that? How do we go from Martin Luther King, Malcolm X to Kanye West and Jay-Z? How? How do we go from having families that funded the civil rights movement to having fatherless communities, murders amongst our kids, in institutions that are predatory to put them and incarcerate them? How do we go from that within 20, 30 years? How can you do that to people? So what's going on here? You can do that to people who don't know who they are. You could do that to people that don't know how to really talk. Why don't they know how to talk? Because what is the basis of our interaction? Survival? Fear of the white man? Fear of oppression? You can't build a society based off of that. So the reality is that in order for us to transform ourselves as people, we have to connect to the African diaspora. And from the African diaspora, we make our way intellectually back to the land of Israel. Right? Now, we saw Ben Ami. We saw Ben Ami in the community de Mona, right? Righteous people. I know them. They're righteous people. The thing is that Ben Ami either has to take a position that he was a prophet, or he was a person who had ideas and was figuring it out as he went. Right? Because he didn't have that culture either. He just had the spirit of connecting to the land and wanting to transcend all the limitations. So we needed them to come here, by the way. And by the way, Israel has some issues with some immigration issues with a lot of them, and they dropped everything. There's no more immigration issues with the Bona community ever again in Israel, right? So that's a huge thing. I'm trying to get one of the guys to come on tonight on Zion Lex to talk about it, right? So the point is on that front, right? On that front, so the dynamic of Africa and the dynamic of applying halakha with the traditions that exist inside of Africa, connecting to those traditions, right? Because the women there, they've been keeping Nida. They've been going to the river after their menstrual cycle. They've been doing kashus. They've been doing ceremonies. They've been doing weddings. They've been doing all these things. Now those things are in line with halakha. So now we need to go create leadership. And then now from Africa, that's the communication back to North America. Because it's counterproductive to the Jewish community for African Americans to come in and not have a sense of a cultural identity as it relates to the Torah. When the Ashkenaz sit together, when the Hasidim sit together, when the Litvaks sit together, they have a shared identity that goes all the way back to their mother countries. Sephardic, Mizrahi, all these people. And so we come in on this dynamic, and you say, oh, well, this person's a convert. Okay, but once we now connect the point of Africa, that's over with. We can't do that anymore. We can't play that game. Okay? I have ancestors, I have cousins, I have nieces and nephews that are in Africa right now that I've never met, that have been separated from hundreds of years. Okay, that have had the merit to keep the very principles that I found and stumbled my way to here in North America. And it's brought me here to Israel. So that's where this is at, right? We have to create a cultural relationship. That doesn't mean we don't learn the sages of that are Ashkenaz and the Hasidim and the Kabbalists and the Spain and the North Africans and Middle Eastern writers and people from the Ukraines and Chabad no, it's one big family. It's one big family of wisdom, and we cannot walk without the others. Right? But nevertheless, in order for us to join the march, we have to know who we are. And we have to focus on that principle. Because this world that we live in Western society, is to make everyone into consumers. And to make everyone, in essence, brain dead and everyone following, whoever made the most money. And as we know that there as in the same way when God created the world, he created 4 levels of desire: rock, vegetation, animal, and human. We also know that those levels of desire also represent the human condition, right? And we know the rock people are just people who live every day that don't really care about much, have simple lives, and they want to, eat, sleep, do whatever pleasurable things, and that's their life. That's the rock level. Then there's a level above that, which is the vegetation level. And these people, they have more of a desire than the rock people. They have a desire for luxury, right? They're your neighbors, who own a shop or something like this, and they make a little bit more money. Their house is a little bit bigger. They got a couple more cars, this type of thing, luxury. They have nicer Shabbat meals. That's their thing. They make money. And there's a level above that, which is the animal level, and we call that level the level of people that have ambition, the people who want power, right? A person who's a general, a person who's a president, a person who's a king, a person who's a leader of a spiritual community, whatever, rabbi, a priest, whatever, imam. They are influencing the vegetation and influencing the rock. This is the animal level. Those are the people in power. And what they call those people in our society is elite. Those are the elite decision makers, right? They get us on this whole game. The elite. So you have that, right? And then you have another level, right? Then you have another level, which is the Adam level. And that level has a desire to be totally plugged into Hashem. I want to live in a way that's totally connected to Hashem, right? And so within those levels, there's variation of levels. But the point is saying that in our society, everyone's pursuing the vegetation level, right? Everyone's pursuing the vegetation level. And out of that, 1% of those people are pursuing the animal level. But the level of the human level, people don't even know exists. They don't even know that there's a level of consciousness that a human being has where they want to be totally connected to the Creator. They've transcended all materialism. They've transcended all these things. They don't even know that exists, right? It's one of the hidden secrets of the world, right? That there's a level of existence that people don't even realize exists, which is this level, right? And so when we talk about this concept of bringing people into the Torah, bringing people into Judaism, we're not talking about proselytizing. We're talking about accessibility, right? Accessibility for those who choose to go that route, making it accessible. So if you're going to make it accessible, what are we making accessible? The Torah? What, someone has to convert to learn some Torah? That shouldn't be the case. We've learned the halakha on teaching quote unquote non-Jews Torah. Now in this situation it's different because we know these people were Israelites, were Jews in Africa, and they were sold in the slave trade. And they came here and they were systematically, their histories and memories and everything was erased in a few generations, which we've seen happen in many societies over history. So we can't just look at the African American and say, okay, Goy, you want to convert? Okay, this is what you got to do. You can't do that. It's not fair. And it's not to say that every African American is descendant of these tribes and that, but nevertheless, there has to be a transformation process. There has to be a conversion process. Period. Regardless of the ancestral history. But what we're saying here, not conversion to becoming Jew, but conversion to reclaim your lost identity. And that has to be done in the place where you lost it. And that's why Nigeria is so important, right? Because that's where we were at. Even Ghana is very important in certain areas, but specifically Nigeria, because that's where all the Igbos are. I mean, in there, again, I need to stop saying Igbo, right? I need to stop saying Igbo, but that's where a concentration of some of the tribes. But we have tribes that are also in Ghana that are you know, it's very close to each other, right? So the southeast region more so of Nigeria, the Israelites, you have places in Ghana and these types of things. So what we want to do is that we want to create a new economy where now not only do we have transformation processes that African Americans can come to and learn, come to yeshiva and learn, go through it, be correctly circumcised, rejoin the tribe, regardless of what the tribe is, rejoin the tribe and be able to develop tools to become back to be a leader, right? But the thing is, the economy part comes in when we talk about Pesach in Nigeria, when we're talking about Rosh Hashanah in Nigeria, when we're talking about Yom Kippur in Nigeria, when we're talking about Sukkot in Nigeria, when we're talking about Hanukkah in Nigeria, right? And all the other things, and people having weddings in Nigeria, and people having the bris milah of their kids in Nigeria, right? All these things allow tens of thousands of Americans to come annually who identify as Israelites to come to Nigeria and to be able to spend their money there, to bring resources there, right? Because the people, the Israelites there who are dedicated to the Torah, you know, that's what they're dedicated to. So there's economic issues there, right? So that's the vision going forward, right? And so that's what I'm going there to do, to establish that program. And that program is going to be a rabbinical court, a rabbinical court, to to govern not only the people in Nigeria, but also the African Americans who want to come. But everything is, you know, it's there, it's organized. You know what I mean? It's a real thing, and a lot of rabbis will be involved. And outside of it, I mean, obviously, you know, Chief Rabbi Pinchas, you know, is a catalyst. But you have me, you know, you have rabbis like Rabbi Demota, other people. A lot of rabbanim are going to be involved because you're building a community, right? So things like shkita and all these other things, you know, have to be perfected and done. So that's the main thing, right? And so that's a big focus going forward for all of us. And before we go into learning some points of the tshuva, any reflections, any thoughts on what I just shared?
Yeah. What? Can you
hear Shibara? Or is it back?
Yeah. Can you hear us okay? Oh, can you hear us okay? I think you're muted.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, go ahead. All right, go ahead.
Okay. One of the reflections and just the thoughts on what you were just saying, Chief Rabbi, that I'm, you know, had to kind of deal with just with our own family and not wanting to lose, you know, the who we are, our identity in the midst of drawing closer to our lost identity, but yet the identity that was already there, that was from traditions. It was a real process because you're learning and you're growing through looking at the way others do things and how they have their Shabbats and all of the different things, the foods and so forth. And for me, I remember just having a moment where I stopped and I said, okay, so we're gonna have salads on Shabbat. We already have, salads that we eat on Shabbat. Um, but I had to dig back and say, culturally, what are some of the things that I remember growing up that was very important on our meal table that is kosher, clean, and I can bring and present to my family that will remind them of our culture, our heritage. And one of the things was simple potato salad, right? And so we started having, I started implementing the potato salad, and I called my aunts, my mother, and some of my older cousins, and I was like, okay, I need some old recipes. I need some things that we can implement into our Shabbats, our festive meals, and so forth. That's going to remind us of our heritage. That is a very rich heritage. And I remember for like Oats, thinking to myself, okay, one of my father's favorite meals was oxtails. I said, okay, I want to make, and my father was the first person to tell me, to lift up the Torah. I said, okay, all right, I want to try to have oxtails, for Oats for our family, as it's lifting up of the Torah and just things of that nature. And the food, that was one part of it, but then also going through the whole process of, as you said, things being basically beat into our ancestors and just indoctrinated to us. I remember when I left one sector of Christianity and moved to the next, it was like, okay, candles are witchcraft, they're this, they're that, and on and on and on. But I had to literally like look back and realize that my grandmother's, that was always a major part of our upbringing. When somebody like it was, and I didn't could make the connection then, like, okay, someone passed away, okay, we're gonna light a candle in their memory. And so I literally did not make the connection because once coming into, the Baptist church, it was like, no, you don't do this, you don't have these candles, you don't, none of this. And so coming to the Sabbath and realizing that that's one of the um, most powerful things that a woman who is a Jewish woman can do is to kindle the light and to bring in, to usher in the Sabbath. And I'm like, okay, so how do I, you know, remove all of this false teaching and now embrace what has already been there? Maybe it wasn't to the magnitude of what I'm understanding right now, but there was something about it that resonated with my grandmothers and so forth. And then the other thing is like looking at my both of my grandparents and realizing that grandma had a room that was her and grandpa's room. But then my grandfather, he was a master carpenter, but there was this room in the back that he would often sleep in. And I'm like, okay, why do they have these separate beds? Why they're married, one room, right? And not to say that everybody has to have this situation, but I was talking to a cousin and he tells me, he said, yeah, on my other side, yeah, grandma had this room, but grandpa, he had another little bed over here as well. And I'm thinking to myself, like, why and how did they do that? And both of my grandparents had large families. My dad, there was 8 children. On my mom's side, there was 10 children. And I'm like, okay, but they got separate bedrooms. So what's the deal with that? And more as I look at, the observance of the laws of Nida and all of those things, I realize like I don't know all the details, but clearly there was something that they knew that, you know, we are now learning, and maybe they didn't have, like I said, you know, all of the halakha that we're um seeking to learn and to observe at this stage, but they knew something, and those things were very deep in our communities, and we have to just kind of, instead of being so focused on other communities, we have to take the time and look back and just slow down and look at our own communities and say our own family histories and say, what was grandpa or grandma doing here? What was some of our older aunts and great aunts doing with this situation? And we have to hold on to those things. Like I think about pecan candy as well. You know, we talk about having dairy, lots of dairy and all these things for, you know, Shava Oats. I'm like, okay, yeah, pecan candy. They made pecan candy. They had lots of pecan trees in the South. Pecan candy was made with, you know, cream, lots of butter, all of those things. I'm okay, I get it, you know, and they made do with what they had, and we should feel very blessed to have such a rich history. And so for me, and even with like learning from you, Chief Rabbi, and the learning from, you know, Chief Rabbi Pincus, all of this is a blessing. It is a blessing because it's not that we're saying, okay, yes, we can only learn from someone who looks just like us, but we're saying that it's very important for us to have that connection back to Africa, and to have someone who is not trying to say that our heritage and our culture does not matter, but yet kind of like one of the homeschool moms that for years I followed, and she's really been like a trailblazer in teaching us how to look for good literature for children who look like us, but not just present them any, you know, just present them garbage, but teach them really good literature. It's like, okay, yeah, I have a bookshelf and I have books that have been written by many great European authors and so forth and whatnot, but there are works and there are writings that are worth knowing and presenting to our families and our children. So it's not about, you know, just throw all the other things away. It's not about throwing all of the things that our Ashkenaz or those other Sephardic groups have done away, but it's more so just like scoot over just a little bit. Let me get in and put a book up on the shelf as well that can add to the whole family. So that's just my thoughts and reflections. Shalom.
Um, Chief Rabbi, this is a very, you know, Baruch Hashem for my wife's comments, because it really leans to what I want to just say about this particular subject matter. You know, I'm gonna start off by saying, just kind of focusing back what you were talking about Beta Israel. I've been watching Beta Israel for a long time now, and even doing some historical research on the Falasha Jews. And one of the things that's very striking is that, you know, their tradition, their culture goes back, I mean, almost 15 centuries. And even past that, you know, we're talking about thousands of years here. Well, within one of the things that you're going to find is somewhere around about the time of the 1920s, 1930s. What was happening was there's a very there was a class of synagogues that they had in Ethiopia, and I'm not quite sure because there are many that were very successful. Many were very successful. They had the keppas on, they wore the suits and so forth within their communities. I don't know who their rabbis was, but one of the things that was taught to that class, to that group of more refined Ethiopian Jews, was the aspect that the reason that they are the color that they are is because they were in the sun of Africa too long. And they took this to heart. This was a very important thing. And because of that, there you mentioned this level of where they are anti-black. And one of the things that they did was they began to develop a type of animosity towards the Negro. Now, I'm saying this because when you get down further in history, when you get down to when Israel is now a state and Israel sends the whole rescue mission, if you look at the dynamics that are in play, you got a situation where as you're going in to rescue Falasha Jews that are living in villages, living on dirt roads, and they are basically being abused. They're in the middle of a famine. They are being matter of fact, they're being threatened by the Sudanese about migrating and leaving and walking on foot. And so it is a very dire situation that they're being rescued out of. And this opens a gate of very complex situations, because when they get to Israel, there's a lot of dynamics that the state of Israel actually opposes upon them. And one of the things that they did was, and I remember watching a Seder. It was a Passover celebration. And one of the things that you saw a lot of European rabbis hosting and doing the Seder and so forth. But what you didn't see was the elders of the Falashas. They didn't show up. And one of the reasons that they didn't show up was because they were not allowed to help to lead and to facilitate the Seder. And the elders were pushed backwards. And when you do that, and what I'm saying is that colonization and the whole ideology behind colonization is still strong. And even those that don't understand it and see it could also be a part of it. When you look at European Jews and you look at European Jewry, you look at the Sephardic, you look at the Ashkenaz, many of the traditions that they have did not come from ancient Israel. Many of the traditions that they have outside of Holocaust. Now, we're not talking about them. I'm talking about there are traditions that are significant to their cultures. And then when you talk about the pogroms, you talk about the Holocaust, you talk about the Spanish Inquisition, you talk about all of the things that was going on in Europe and all of the oppressions and all of the trials. Those things, those struggles became a part of their culture and became a part of their essence. So when we talk about Nigeria, you talk about the wars that the Nigerians fought with the Nigerian government. And they were going back and forth. You talk about the struggles that the Falasha Jews had in Ethiopia, and you talk about the Fulani, and you talk about how they were hiding in bushes and in the deep parts of the jungles, hiding from the native tribes. Also, when you talk about the Lemba and the oppression that they had, where they could not circumcise their children on the 8th day, but they had to wait till their children were 13 years old to circumcise them because of Christian missionaries oppressing them. These stories are told by their elders in all of these generations and all of these cultures around the world, Jews around the world. Whether you're in Malaysia or you're from India, wherever it's at, these stories are transmitted down by their elders. So when we go to these communities and we say, hey, listen, you have to depart from your ways and depart from that culture and adopt our culture only. Not saying that there's some things that's not beautiful, things that are rich, that are beneficial to any community. But when you take away the elders in that transmission, those those struggles became a part of your testimony, and they're the very things that actually bound you together. So it's when I saw this, I remember looking at this and saying, man, this is not going to be beneficial to the Falasha Jews, because they're going to lose that dynamic that kept them for 1,000 years, for 2,000 years. They're going to lose that what made them cohesive. As little as some may view their stories are huge. These are whole ciphers that have not been written down. So when you lose that and you cut off, it's just like here in America, to forget about the Civil War, to forget about the Tulsa, Oklahoma, to forget about all these things that actually forced us to stay together. To back, because I've talked to some there's some that I've talked to that are African American that are going through conversion processes, and I remember talking to one brother, and we were just talking, and he's a lot older than me, and I said, elder, and he cut me off. He cut me off, and he told me, he said, see, brother, this is why conversion is important, because you got to lose all of that African American culture, all of that mindset, to calling me an elder. And I said, and that threw me back, because I'm taught, and I was taught to respect my elders. I was taught to rise when a hoary-headed one comes into the room, despite his nationality. So in our essence, when we talk about what is happening, they took away the elders, and when they came in to colonize Africa, they took away the elders, they killed the elders, and then they killed the warrior class. The warrior class for us are those that are intelligent. It's not the athletes. Because when we talk about Kanye West, these are entertainers. LeBron James, these are entertainers. They're entertaining the masses. And everybody can benefit from that. But when we talk about the W.E. Du Bois, we talk about the Frederick Douglasses, we're talking about the Thurgood Marshalls. These are the intellectuals. And so that is your warrior class. That is our warrior class. What you're doing, you are our warrior class. Chief Rabbi Pincus is our warrior class. Because the battle is not on the field anymore. The battle is in the mind. So to recapture what you all are doing in Nigeria is going to recapture the eldership. It's going to recapture the warrior class. It's going to recapture this infrastructure. And so to me, it would be a wonderful thing to have full support and celebration from the jury over every continent to look at this dynamic and say, man, this is a part of our story as well. This is a story that's a part of the Jewish people. And we want to be a part of that, because the very thing that was trying to kill them was also killing us. And we can't lose that. If we lose that, that's why it's so important about what you all are doing, because we're finding that, you know what? The process is, we're realizing that we can't go to other communities. We can go to other communities and say, hey, help us, show us. But we can't go to those other communities and say, build it for us. But rather, that is the process that we must do. And when we do that process, it doesn't, we're not talking about validation amongst men. This validates us through heaven. That is the validation process, that you're willing to do this, that you're going to put in the struggle. All of these communities that built the mikvahs, and they built these systems, and they struggled to do these things. They were building these things, and they were having to go in basements, and man, that is commendable. And guess what? If we have to go through the same process, that's the process of validation. That is the conversion of a whole community. And so I applaud what you're doing, and I applaud what Chief Rabbinate is doing, because it's time. It is definitely time. And hey, like I said before, you have our full support. Full support.
And I appreciate that, and I know the Robinhood appreciates that. Chief Robert Pincus is with us, but yeah, this is the trajectory. You know what I mean? This is where we're going. This is the focus, and all it is. We're just the people who want to be involved. In the Torah in this way. Again, we're not going out convincing people. Whatever, it's a total voluntary thing. And from that dynamic, we want to make sure that they have the tools to be successful, and not just compliant, but successful. Meaning that we could produce the highest scholars, from our community, right? And this is not a Pan-African movement either, right? Because we're not even talking about that. Like, the issues in Africa are the issues in Africa, right? What we're saying over here is that we're talking specifically about the spiritual transformation of the Israelite who's in diaspora, right? And what that individual needs in order to be successful and to be able to participate in a collective. A person who learns by us should be able to go and pray in a Chabad shul, a Yemenite shul, a Mizrahi shul, or Sephardi. No matter where he's at in the world, he should be able to participate in that Jewish community, right? He's not limited. It's not like it's not having a black corner, right? It's just saying that when you go to that person's house, that, hey, they may have some songs that you never heard sung at a Shabbat table before. They may have dishes, and as your wife was saying, certain dishes and meals and way things are cooked that you guys didn't have. But I have that same experience when I go to someone who's from Iran versus someone who's from Iraq versus someone who's from Syria. They got different dishes versus someone who's from the Ukraine versus someone who's from Moscow, right? Someone who's from, a part of Spain versus someone who's from New Mexico, right? So it's exactly that idea. And like you said, we have so much to offer. And truthfully, 100,000 African Americans connected to Torah mitzvot would do more to deal with anti-Semitism than the entire Jewish community combined, right? All X amount of million, right? So we have to understand what we're talking about here. We're talking about the most powerful, most influential people in the world who are doing it with minimal resources in comparison to the people that they are pushing back against, right? So we're talking about the most powerful people on planet Earth, right? And they say, hey, we're descendants of Israelites, and a lot of the communities in America, and I don't know why they deny these people. I don't know. I don't know why the Rabbi Matthews and the Rabbi Fords and those communities were not absorbed by Jews. Somebody wasn't thinking into the future, right? Somebody wasn't thinking, or Black people calling themselves Jews messes up the Negro concept, mess up the colored concept, mess up the African American concept, messes up the Black concept. Because there's laws put in place that protect Jews, right? From all types of predatory and abusive behavior. There's entire systems. There's $1 billion industry dealing with anti-hate images, anti-hate ideas, anti-hate, all these things, right? These things exist in America. But I'm a Jew. Do I have those same protections? Do I have that same social class? When I go and stand in front of a judge, am I looked at as a Jew, or am I looked at as a colored person? An indentured person that's in the legal court system that's designed to not be in my favor. How am I viewed? So, go ahead. I got you on that. Go ahead.
Yeah, you did. I think that this goes back to whether or not we are looking at it from a nationalistic standpoint, or a secret society standpoint. Okay, so if we're looking at it from an institutional and an organizational standpoint, then there's a memberships. Okay, and so my memberships are private. when you go back in history and you look at, like, for example, the Masons, right? During the time of slavery, and even during the time after the Civil War, when slaves were free, you had what was called the development of the Freemasons. The Freemasons, a lot of people think that's just generic, but that was because the regular Masons, the Shriner Masons, did not want to, that they understood, oh yeah, you all can be a part of this society, because we got to let you in, but we still got to be separated. So from that dynamic, it's okay for me to call you a convert, a ger, but for me to say Zera Israel, that to the society, that doesn't look good. Why? Because this is what we've been taught, and this is what we've been taught. It doesn't look good. But the whole concept of Zera Israel was that you had you from the matrilineal line, and so therefore you still have to go through a process now, because you're not being taught by a Jewish mother. So from that concept, that's why Rabbi Matthews and them had such a problem, and they were not being accepted, because listen, it was hot. It was a rough time. So I don't fault or blame European Jewry for not, like, just embracing it all the way, because it's hot. It really is hot. But I believe that at the point that we're in history now, we have no excuse. Now we're on the other side of the Red Sea. Our enemy is silent. Our enemy is under the water. Not just us. We're in the room. We're in the world. And we have an opportunity here to embrace all of Israel and usher in the days of Mashiach, and understanding that there's that parallel. That parallel is the fact that in order for us to usher in Mashiach, we have to acknowledge, and we have to come together and lay down all of our own boundaries, the things that are holding us back. And so you touched that was on it.
Hey, so that's where we're at with this. Exactly what you're saying. It's like, I'm an Orthodox rabbi. Am I offered the same prediction? I mean, the same protections, the same rules of people anti-Semitism. Am I allotted those same privileges and protections in America as an African-American Orthodox? Or do I leave African-American status and I now have a Jewish status? Right? Because if I don't, then there's something systematic about that. Right? There's something systematic, and there's something in the system that says that I do not get the same protection and the same rights of protection from the federal government as a Jew that someone else does, because my skin tone is different. Right?
Rabbi, here in the United States, of course, most Hebrew Israelites, right? Most Hebrew Israelites don't even refer to themselves as African Americans. And if you ask them, if you ask any Hebrew Israelite, they'll say, "No, I'm a Hebrew. I'm an Israelite." Matter of fact, on my daughter's death certificate, it says Hebrew. Okay. So, and you go to her gravesite, daughter Sarah. So the idea is that I think another question is, for us, when do we stop? When do we cease to be Black? When do we cease to be African American? When do we cease to be Nigerian? You see, because the reason that this is significant is because when our ideology about ourselves change as well, and say, no, hey, I'm a Jew, I'm a Hebrew, I'm an Israelite, I'm I'm a descendant, I'm of the seed of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. When we do that, it will demand the world to look at us in a certain way. Because even though we see like European Jewry, right? You'll hear Ashkenazi, Sephardic, and so forth. But I don't hear many of them going around saying, "Hey, I'm a German Jew." What you want?
This makes me think about this, which was a very sensitive topic for me over the last month or so or whatnot. We're talking about, and I wanted to thank you, Chief Rabbi, for your wisdom and your everything that you poured out into our family,
and patience too.
and yes, and the patience as well, concerning the whole mikvah process and whatnot. Because after like really just like digging in and just studying it out for myself and really looking at stories of women before who had gone through, great lengths to be able to hold by family purity. I remember thinking to myself, like, okay, I'm hearing exactly what Chief Rabbi is saying, and I know that we have, their support and so forth, but I'm hearing everything, and I have to really just walk in this level of humility. And I just remember this the 2 days before, the night 2 days before, just crying to Hashem, saying, okay, Father, I know what you have spoken in your word concerning this. And I also know that we are in a frame where, everyone is not going to just like welcome us with open arms, and we're going to have a lot of hurdles to cross, right? And so I found myself, Chief Rabbi, just saying, you know what? This is it. Just lay it out on the table, and that's that. And Hashem is going to take care of the rest. And I remember like my phone had broke and I was having all these issues with my phone, and I wanted to call sooner, but it ended up being like a day or two before. And I called, and the lady who was the head over the mikvah, she calls me back and she's like, yes, I got your message. And I said, I wanted to have a discussion with you because, after just, speaking with our rabbi, he encouraged that this would be a wonderful idea to do this. Great. However, we also understand that I am not a part of any said, community in this particular area. And so I don't want to make anyone feel uncomfortable with, moving in this direction. I said, I just went off the information that was provided, and you asked if, in fact, I was a Jewish woman, and that's what I believe. That's what I'm holding by. That's it. And I said, so I just wanted to have this dialogue, this conversation with you. And Chief Rabbi, it was at that point where it's like, okay, it's out of my hands. I'm not trying to come in and, assert anyone's authority or move in this direction like this here. But if this is who we are, and this is who everyone is, seeking to serve Hashem in this way, then we have to be there for one another. We have to be able to recognize that, no, my walk in this may not look exactly like yours, and yours may not look like mine, and so forth. But at the end of the day, we have to respect each and every person's traditions and how they are. And the other dynamic, I did not want to do anything that would make whatever they had going on different from what I was thinking to do. So it was really like, okay, just Father, help me to just be as humble in this process as possible. And Chief Rabbi, I have to say that it was truly, just a blessing. It taught me a lot, and I'm still learning. And I know that you're gonna, teach us some more about those things. But that's where I believe, Hashem desires for us all to be, just recognizing that we're not coming to try to, take over what anyone else or do, any of those things, but we're all just wanting to come together and work together. Not to say that everybody is willing to have that open, but at the end of it all, the lady who was over the mikvah, she was just like, I just respect that so much. And she said, I don't believe there's going to be any problems and so forth. And the door was then open. And so that's just one thing that I wanted to add to what my husband was just speaking on.
Yeah, and on that point too, it's like, on that point too, it's like, the Jewish community, I mean, I get it, but it's time to wake up. You know what I'm saying? Like, at the end of the day, I get it. North America, people came, high majority of people, Jewish in America, came from Europe and early Americas, mid-time Americas. And I get it. You have the most racist white people here. You're coming from racist white people in America, in Europe. But now it's just like, come on, man. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you got all these people. We wouldn't even have half that. And they said that there's the level of anti-Semitism that exists in America. You could say largely that has to do with the lack of a presence of Black Jews. Or people consider Black. There's this label, like your husband was saying, like, what does that mean? I'm Black. What is it? I ain't Black. I'm brown. I'm bronze. You know what I'm saying? Like, what's this Black thing, right? So, because it's because and your husband made a powerful point on in this area as well. He said the whole concept of Black, Negro, all this, that was just another term for property. You know what I'm saying? Like, we were a form of property in America. You know what I'm saying? And that was our experience. Like, we were property. We got off the slave ship, and we were like any other, like a donkey, ox, whatever. You know what I mean? Like, this is what we were, and we were sold in the same way. We were sold. You know what I'm saying? So the question is, when do I leave that status on a sovereign land? Right? That's the question, right? When do I leave that status? Forget the Jewish thing. When do I leave the status of being property in North America? Right? And what do I need to do that? And so that's part of this conversation of, when people talk about reparations, these things, it's not about giving someone a check, right? Because if systems are not in place, the system will figure out how to get all that money back from you in 2 years. You broke. Just like people win the lotto. You know what I mean? That wealth doesn't stay with them. They don't know how to. So it has to be systems in place. So these discussions is a very important thing. For me, and me teaching is because it's like, you have to know who you are, and it's not. And I was just talking to Zakaria about this the other day. The power of Black people decolonizing themselves. Everybody's going to do it once we do it. Once we step up to the plate, because again, we're not talking about Pan-Africanism. We're talking about the concept of, hey, this is what I was prior to colonialism. Once we do that, American Indians will go back to their original situation. Many of our European brothers will go back to their Scottish. They'll go back to Swedish and Polish and all these other beautiful traditions that they come from, Middle Eastern, because all of us right now are trying to be the Western man, right? All of us, white people, Black people, we're trying to be this ideal person that's dehumanized, insensitive, divisive, racist, and self-serving, ambitious, right? So the whole world, we all need to decolonize. None of this is real. Right, so this is not just about like, oh, it's about Black people. No, it's like, no, but Black people are we are in our generation. We're the Israelites, right? African Americans are the Israelites of this generation. We are the downtrodden. We're the ones that everyone's spitting on. We're the ones that children are being murdered and no one cares. We're the ones who've been slaves in this land and all this. That's who we are right now. Spade is spade. We're 2025. The black man is no different than the Israelite in Egypt 3,000 years ago. 3,300 years ago. You know what I'm saying? So that's where this conversation is, right? And we're living in that status. And thank God that we have a Torah, which is the antidote from leaving any form of slavery, right? Because our Ashkenaz brothers, they're not free. They're not free. They got to pretend to be white just to survive. They have to forbid their entire Jewish heritage just to live amongst people who want to murder them. That's freedom? Oh, but he made some money at Sony Pictures. He made some money over at Warner Brothers, but he ain't got no Shabbat. He ain't got no kosher. His daughter or sons may be around other Jews. That's because of private school, but nothing to do with the Torah or mitzvot. Mitzvot. So he's not free either. Just because he made some, the Jews were making money. That's not freedom for a Jew. Freedom as a Jew is walking around the streets of Jerusalem with your seat out and your kippah on and your beard and your payot, and you're going to the basic mikdash, you're going to the kotel, the daven on Shabbat. That's freedom. And you go and you have your Shabbat meal and you sing your heart out and you do the brachot and you're free with God for that moment. That's freedom for a Jew. Not having a Bentley, not living in the hills of Bel Air. That's not freedom. That's Gehenna. That's a path to Gehenna. Those Jews that are not keeping Torah, they're on a path to Gehenna. Promoting homosexuality, path to Gehenna. Transgender, taking images of people, taking black images, reinforcing killing and murdering. That's Gehenna. So let's not think the white man's version of success is freedom for a Jew of any complexion. We're here to serve Hashem. That's what we're here to do. And if you need to come to Israel to figure that out, those people, they live in the olden days. Well, so what's the new days? Cable TV, social media, what's the new days? So we have to understand what it is what is freedom for a Jew. I'm not here speaking for all people that are dark. I'm speaking for the people who are descendants of Zerah Israel. Right? And our conversation specifically are about people who fall in the frame of Tinok Shenishba. People who have ancestors that were captured and their descendants had no idea of who they were and where they came from. It's a halakhic principle. It's not my idea. All right, so let's go into a little bit. We'll learn a little bit. I know we talked a lot, but we got to talk these things out because this isn't religion. This is spirituality. This is food for the soul, right? And so if my body and my mind and my psychology, it's like one of the great things I love about Chabad. Now, I spend a lot of time learning Chabad, spending time with people at Chabad, because the Alter Rebbe, he went far. He went so far in his generation. And a whole movement came through his understanding of halakha and his teacher's understanding of halakha. And he put all these things together and created, with the Tanya. He wrote he wrote his own Shulchan Aruch in essence, right? He expounded on different things that existed. He understood it differently. And one of the things that the Lubavitch Rebbe in New York, Menachem Smearsham, was like, I'm saying these people are so giants for how they were able to take the Torah and do what they did with it. But one of the things by the Lubavitch Rebbe, he talks about in some of his writings, that a person's spiritual expression has to be not just in the way he sees the world or how he dresses or where he hangs out or the people he's around. He says he has to be able to express his spirituality in his personality. Your personality has to be expression of you in God. Your personality. This is beyond how you dress. This is beyond the look and how you talk. Your personality. So those levels is where we have to take our relationship to God. This isn't about people accepting us. Thank God people aren't accepting us because we may fall in the same traps as other communities. The freedom is like, oh, okay, well, I got to talk to people, this, and all right, cool. And the thing too with Black people, it's like, it's a big concept, because like sometimes, like I have guys that African American guys, who are Jews, and they're trying to get married, these types of things, and and they go in these circles and they complain about not getting hooked up. And they're like, I'm Jewish, this, blah, blah, blah. But it's like, but this is keep it real. If I'm from, like, say I'm from Ukraine or something, right? And I'm Chabad and I got my own thing, blah, blah, blah. And we got our own scarce resources, and we put together a situation for a bunch of us to come together and kind of intermix and see if we could get people married and, and these types of things, we have these, we have these types of things, right? But the thing is, so I come in there, African American, charismatic. I'm just using myself as an example. Great looking. All these great things, right? And I come in there and say, "Hey, why y'all not hooking me up the same way? We all Jewish." You know what I'm saying? But us as Americans, as Black Americans, that's how we see it. Once you're American, you're American. But there's people that got their own crews, they got their own situations, they built their own thing, they're trying to do it. I don't see Sephardic guys going in these environments looking for girls. But I do see my African American brothers do it. And they'll start dressing like the people. Hey, I'm wearing the same hat as you. What's up? And don't get me wrong, it doesn't mean that, it's not, you can't find someone you connect to. But if we don't feel the same love, we got to understand, like, it's a whole thing, and there's a lot of small-minded people, who were taught in very small-minded schools that their means of survival was ethnic purity, which has nothing to do with Judaism. Judaism is the opposite of that, We're spreading that thing, So anyways, let's go into a little bit of tshuva. We're just learning a little bit, to sanctify the whole conversation completely. But we're not religious here, We're getting in touch with ourselves as human beings. This is human being Torah, And from the human being, then we elevate to this frame of Zera Israel. Right? And then from there, we go into the idea of a nation of Kohanim. We join the priestly level by executing this Torah into the world, right? But we're at the level of Adam. We are a human being. This is the reality that we're living in, and how do we interact with it? Everybody's not going to give support. And it's better that they don't. If all the people were supporting everything that I was doing right now, I wouldn't have the freedom to say even what I'm saying right now. They'll say, fall back, chill out. Why are you turning up? Why are you saying that? Why are you going in on the government? Why are you doing that? No, because I'm allowed to do my own thing. And how I understand myself is through my rabbis, right? Because you need to have people who guide you and make sure, you're making the right decisions. And I have that on multiple levels. I have Chief Rabbi Pinchas and I have a whole support team of humongous, strong people that believe in me. Baruch Hashem, thank God. So it's not like I'm on my own, but nevertheless, if I had all these other committees around me, I wouldn't be able to do it. So let's learn a little bit, and I got to dive in mincha too. I know this. I don't know how we got into this long discussion, but it's needed. Hold on a second. Okay, hold on. Bring it back. Hold on. Where we at? Okay, so and by the way, next week we're going to start learning the Sefer. It's a very simplistic but extremely deep and concise Sefer on the laws of purity, right? So we're going to go through the whole system of the laws of purity, and it's a very sophisticated situation, right? So we're going to go through that next week, and we're going to go through it, and by the time we're going to go through the whole thing. I mean, the whole Sefer, because it's important, and we're going to know all the laws. And the thing about this particular sefer was interesting. It's written by like what they call like a contemporary, a rabbi of this time. So he doesn't challenge, but he seeks to have clarity on what is and what is not, what is stringencies, what is the halacha. He goes through that. So I really respect his position. But people, I don't know, like not everyone like agrees, but it's a mainstream. Hold on, I'm bringing the thing up. So we're going to start learning that next week, and by the end of that book, we'll be scholars on the situation and give great advice. Okay, alrighty. All right, so let's go into the Sefer. We're back in with Rabbeinu Yonah with we're with Rabbeinu Yonah. So we're on part 13, and I'm pretty sure we're still in the process of grieving, right? I don't think we left that. So he starts with, he says Umo
No,
Day. Go ahead.
Rabbi, we're 19 and 20.
Yeah, 19. Yeah, 19. Yeah. So is it 20? You think is it 20 or 19?
19 and 20. That's where we left off.
Yeah,
I'm not
19.
certain which one. I just wrote down 19 or 20 because I didn't see numbers.
Yeah, you see on the left hand side, you see the little numbers right there.
Where?
It's
Let's
like
see.
what the first Hebrew word you see on the right next.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
we have
I
it.
got you.
Yeah.
That's
So I
how we
was
keep track.
yeah, okay. So we're on 19. So it says Umo de ve'ozev yiru ham. Okay. So he's bringing a verse from Proverbs, and he says, okay, so we can't go back over it. We can't do such a review. But the point is, we know where we're at, right? I thought it was three parts principles we're holding by, like it keeps going. Okay, so now we're surfing, so we're gonna figure it out. Okay, so he brings a verse from Proverbs. He says, but he who confesses and gives up will find mercy. Right. So I guess this is the idea of omitting what we did, speaking it out and loud. Not that we're gonna put it on Facebook, but we want to speak it out. We want to write it out. We want to own it. He says the explanation for this verse is that even though there are three foundational repentance, okay, so that's what he's talking about. I guess he's saying there's three foundations of repentance, and I guess within those three foundations, I guess he says regret, confession, and leaving the sin. Okay, and here it is only applied to two. Regret and confession are both included in he who confessed. For he who confesses regret, but that there is no repentance without three, as one who regrets and confess, but does not leave the sin, is like one who immerses with impure animal in his hand. Yeah, we read this last time. He says, however, he who confesses and gives them up will find mercy, right? And he says, and for the individual in this case, even though there are many levels of repentance, as we have explained. So this is what we Omer Acharei Kin. So he says in Mishlei, so Proverbs, he says, Ashrei Ha'adam. So it says, Me Fachad, Tamid Ukashe Libo Yiful. So he says, and he said after this, he says after that point, the other Proverbs, he says, happy is the man who finds, happy is the man who is always afraid, but he raises his heart. He raises his heart. Happy is the man who is always afraid, but he who rises his heart falls into misfortune. Explanation is, even though he confesses and gives them up, he should always be afraid. That's why maybe he has not fulfilled the required measure of repentance. For it is required for it requires many levels. So should he increase his fortitude. This guy. I love how people call me right at the wrong time. Hold on. Sorry about that. Can you guys hear me still? You guys still hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, cool. Sometimes when people call and they throws the whole thing. All right. So actually, it's funny. The guy who just called me is one of the spokespeople from the Demona community. I'm trying to get him to come on. I'm going to Rob Zion Lex tonight, and we're going to talk about a bunch of things. We'll see Rob Pincus come on maybe, but just to kind of like update, and then also the whole Hebrew Israelite thing here in Israel, I think is good for people to know in America. He says he should always be afraid that maybe this impulse will return to him. So it's not just it's not just like a boxing match when you're in a boxing match and the guy gets knocked out, right? So you knock out the evil inclination. We're worried about that inclination getting back up, and as we're walking into the dressing room, coming up and jumping on us from behind, right? So he's saying this idea of complete tshuva, right? That's what he's talking about. He said he should be afraid that maybe this impulse will return to him. So he should guard against it in every instance, as always add fear of God to his soul and always pray to God to help him towards repentance and to save him from his impulse. But he who raises his heart falls into misfortune. One who says in his heart, I have filled my measure of repentance, and does not always make efforts to acquire higher levels of repentance, and to add fear to his soul, will be punished for this. And for he is of a raised heart, and does not recognize the deficiency of his spirit. And if he does not recognize the greatness of his obligations to refine his ways with great refinement, he will always not guard himself from his impulse, which will always ambush him. I know I did say that, but he says, hence he will fall into the hands of his impulse, right? So he's saying here this idea of complete tshuva, right? And I think he's still working on this idea of worrying, right? And this idea of saying that, like, you got to be scared of the sin. You know, Rabbi Pinchas, Chief Rabbi Pinchas, when he was here in the Old City, we had this thing like it's called a sheleg, right? And so the sheleg is like, it's a 3-day fast. You don't eat anything for 3 days, which is like, before I did it was an insane concept, right? I thought for sure I was going to die until I like looked it up. Like, okay, you can possibly survive. So anyway, there's a 3-day fast. This goes all the way back to Rabbi Shimon, and they've been doing this for thousands of years. It's a very intense thing. So it's a 3-day fast, and then at the end of the fast, on the last day of the fast, they have this thing called a snow mikvah, right? Which is basically like, you get all this ice, or you could get snow, whatever, and they put all this plastic on the ground and they fill it all with ice. So it's all ice, freezing cold, right? So the men take off all their clothes, and we stand up, and then we lay flat on the ice, and then we flip over on both sides of our body, the stomach and then the back, right? And then you stand up. And you do it like close to 100 times. And every time you do it, Rabbi Pinchas is in the back, and he's reading off of one of the levels of the Sefirot. But the levels within the Sefirot, because you're climbing up all these things. It was one of the most intense things. And when I was doing it, and Sephora did it too, you know. And the thing is, when we did it, it was like, I mean, obviously we did it separately, men and women. And the women did it with the women, I think for sure, But the point is saying that when I was in the middle of it, it was so intense. I thought I was going to die. I was like, hey, this is it. I'm done. Like, this is it, baby. Like, this is how I came to Israel, and I met this Kabbalist in the Old City from Africa. He got me to fast for these days. I'm doing the ice thing. This is it, baby. I'm over, right? So anyways, Baruch Hashem, I made it through, and it was one of the most elevated spiritual experiences I've ever had in my life. But the point is to say that I don't want to ever have to do it again. Now, there's guys that I know, like Zakaria, and I don't want to put his business out there, but he does it a lot. You know what I'm saying? He's really into this. Like, and Rabbi Pinchas does it a lot. I'm not there. You know what I mean? Like, that was enough for me. And the thing about it, I don't want to commit any type of sins to have to think about dealing with something like that again. But the point is saying it's that fear of sin. And it's fear of all the work that it's going to take to get back to a normal place. Yes, you're going to come back to a higher level, for sure. Right? You're only going to come back at a higher level and more refined. But I'd rather work on other things. You know what I mean? He says, K Nain Shena Amar. It says in Jeremiah, Beishiliti, Vegam, Nikola Meti Ki Na Sati. So he said the sixth principle is shame. Shame is like the matters that are stated in Jeremiah. I am ashamed, and I'm also humiliated, for I bear the disgrace of my youth. As behold that a sinner may be very ashamed to transgress in front of people, and he would be humiliated if people sensed and noted his transgression. So how is it that he would not be ashamed in front of the creator of the world? And this is only from the Holy One, blessed be he, being distanced from his feelings. Hence, he is ashamed towards the creatures, but he is not ashamed towards the Creator. May his memory be blessed. And may our rabbis may their memory be blessed, as it says in Brachot, that at the time of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai's death, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, huge person. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, just to show his level, when the temple was destroyed, he's the one who negotiated with the Romans for the Jewish court to be able to resettle and not to be murdered. Right? So without there's no Talmud, right? So that's who he is. So he says, his students said to him, our teacher, bless us. So this is when he's on his deathbed. It's powerful. This is on his deathbed. The students come to him and say, our teacher, bless us. He said to them, this is what he says to his students. He says, may it be the will, may it be his will that the fear of heaven shall be upon you, like the fear of the flesh and blood. His students said, to the point and not beyond? He said to them, would it only be so? Know that when one commits a sin, a transgression, he says to himself, I hope that no man will see me. So let's try to understand what he's saying just for a second. He says, may it be the will that the fear of heaven shall be upon you like the fear of flesh and blood. So the fear of other people, right? And the students say, wait, why just him? And he says, know that when one commits a transgression, he says to himself, I hope no other man sees me. So he's talking on their condition, right? You know, it's interesting too. There's this concept in the Gemara where it talks about this idea of a ganav and a gazlan, right? And so a ganav and a gazlan are both, in essence, thieves. But a ganav is a person, you know those gangsters, they'll walk into the house and be like, hey, I'm taking this. I'm taking this. It's mine. What you gonna do about it? And they just take it and they leave, right? That would be a gosling. He just steals in broad daylight. He doesn't care who sees him. But a ganav is a cat burglar. He comes, he does it at nighttime. He doesn't want anyone to see him, this whole thing. And interesting enough, is the person who is a ganav gets a stricter punishment. Because the person who is a ganav is worried about what other people think. They don't fear Hashem. As where the person who's a ganav, he just feels entitled and, he's not hiding from anybody. So that guy, you got to give a little bit more respect to than the person who's willing to do something in secret that he knows is wrong, right? Okay, so he says, Halama Rega, Halayona Beze, Shekalem Adam, Ala O Notav Melifine. So he says the highest level in this is that one would be humiliated by all of his inequities in front of God. May he be blessed. The content of humility is the feeling of shame and change in radiance in his face, like the matters that stated in Psalms. Shame covers my face, and you will see that in every place humiliation is mentioned after shame, and it is more than shame. Be ashamed and humiliated. It says in Ezekiel, I am ashamed and humiliated. And when the sinner sees that God, may he be blessed, passes over his transgression, he is patient with him, does not pay him back, and does not do him accordingly to his sins, and does not pay him back according to his iniquities. He has greater shame in his heart. And does not one who sins against the king of flesh and blood and was treacherous to him, yet is forgiven by him and feel ashamed towards him. So he's going in these two frames of this relationship with God versus relationship with man, right? It's very important. He says, according to Ezekiel, it says like this, thus you shall remember and feel shame. And when I forgive you for all that you did, and our rabbis, may your memory be blessed, say in Brachot that someone who does something and that is ashamed by it has all of the inequities forgiven. And so does we find with Shaul, who says in Shmuel 1, he no longer answers me, either by prophets or in dream, but did not mention the Urim and Turim, for he was ashamed to mention them, since he killed the inhabitants. It says Nov and in the city of priests. So Shmuel said to him in Samuel's, tomorrow your sons and you will be with me in section of the world to come. And one acquires a level of shame by meditating to think about the greatness of God and how evil is the one who rebels against his words, and in always remembering that God sees his deeds and examines his feelings and looks into his thoughts. Okay, so let's stop here. This is 23. We only did a few, but we had a big discussion before, and I think we're like an hour, and I gotta pray before the sun sets over here, and so we'll continue tomorrow earlier. We're going to continue tomorrow earlier, so let's try to do 15 tomorrow. And it'll be a little bit different than we'll just kind of we'll touch on the weekly parsha a little bit, maybe some halakas, whatever. But we'll figure it out. But we could keep going on the tshuva thing. As you can see, this tshuva thing is a monster. So it's not as simple as people think. It's not this, I'm sorry, I won't do it again thing. No, there's a whole system and drawn out, and we've only touched in a part of it. It keeps going. He keeps bringing more and more principles, and this is only section 1, right? So we can see, and this is one sefer. Most people like to learn Rambams, Hilkot Tshuva. It's a lot of stuff. But I don't want to make it too heavy. You know what I'm saying? Where it's where everything's like so heavy, and we're in a place of repentance all the time. We're crying, this whole thing. We should have some level of enjoyment, and happiness, inspiration. Hence the conversation we had to start with. So anyway, any last points, any reflections before we close this?
We're good.
Okay. See our brother Brandon, you got any thoughts you want to add before we close it out?
It was just a beautiful lecture. Just receiving the light. I think I'll just be reserved and enjoy and contemplate on what was shared.
Beautiful, beautiful. So you could join us tomorrow. We're going to have, we always have a pre-Shabbat schmooze where we just bring out some very inspirational ideas to go into Shabbat on a very high note. So it's my job to find that literature to get us there. And so we do that tomorrow, and God willing, more people join us. Baruch atah.